Hello everyone, I want to make a video today doing this in response to a request. I had done a video on Esther, that's where I'm going to be today, before, but I did it on the part that where Esther approached the king and he held out the golden scepter and she lived. It's such a great example of seeking the Lord. But anyway, I'm going to start off at the beginning. Uh, and it says, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, uh, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over in 107 and 20 provinces. And in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the third year of his reign he made a feast unto all the princes and unto servants. The power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the province, been before him." Esther was a little maid that was in captivity there where this king was, a Jewish girl. A lot of them was in captivity at that time there. "When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. And when the days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto the great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple, to silver rings and pillars of marbles. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And he gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse from one another, and royal wine in abundance throughout the state of the king, according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel, for so the king had appointed to the officers of the house that they should adore according to every man's pleasure. And Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus." So the queen, the wife of the king. "On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded," and he's talking about 7 names here I won't pronounce, but the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king, with a crown royal, to show the people and princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. He wanted to show her off. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was, and he told about the 7 princes of Persia and the Media, which saw the king's face and said, the first in the kingdom, "What shall we do unto Queen Vashti according to the law? Because she has not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains." And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, "Vashti the queen has not only done wrong to the king only, but also to the princes and to all the people in the province of the king of Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so they shall despise their husbands in their eyes." When it was reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. "Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard the deed of the queen, thus shall arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him. Let it be written among the law of the Persians and the Medes, that it shall not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before the king Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal state unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he had made shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husband honor, both great and small. And this the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and every people after their language, and every man should bear rule in his own house, and it shall be published according to the language of every people. He ousted the queen, so that brought about trying to find a new queen. So they had a beauty pageant of sorts. I mean, you can read about it. I just read in chapter 1, and but then in between there in chapter 4, where I'm going to start, there was a plot to kill the Jews, and so there was a beauty pageant, and Esther, the little Jewish girl, became the queen in that place. In chapter 4 says, when Mordecai, which was a relative of Esther, I think it might have been a cousin, whatever it was he was kin to, perceived all that was done. When Mordecai saw that they were out to kill the Jews, he rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out in the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province wheresoever the king's commandment and decree came to kill the Jews, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing in many lands, sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's handmaids and her chamberlains came and told it her. When we're talking about the queen disobeying the king, I've told this before, but we went to Smyrna on Saturday night a few years ago, several years ago, and we were going to go back Sunday morning, and the next morning we were in a motel, and I got up and started reading, and just wherever it fell open, it fell open to husbands and wives. And the first 3 verses was telling the woman what to do. Boy, I was rejoicing. I had went over to the window and pulled the shades open where I could see without turning the lights on, and I was reading. The first 3 verses was talking to the woman. Man, I was rejoicing. I was just about to wake Melinda up and tell her to listen to this. About that time, that scripture turned on the men. And I just looked over at her and I said, sleep on, in my mind. Sleep on, girl, I'll tell you later. And I've said to young girls before in our church and other places, if you can't obey your husband, if the guy that you're looking at and you think is so great, if you don't think you can obey him, just keep looking, because it needs to be somebody you can obey. Anyway, let's get back to this. I digress a little bit here. So there was weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend unto her, and he gave a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was. So Hathach went forth to Mordecai into the street of the city which was before the king's gate, and Mordecai told him of all that happened unto him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasures for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she could go into the king, to make supplication unto him, and to make request for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. And again Esther spake unto Hathach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants know, all the king's servants and the people of the provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king to the inner court where it's not called, there is one law of his to be put to death, except to such which the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. I've told that. And they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not within thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall enlargement and deliverance come to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer, Go gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to what Esther had commanded. Mordecai said, Who knows if you came to a kingdom for such a time as this? And if deliverance, if she didn't choose to be part of the deliverance, it's just like God. He don't. If you choose not to do and to live for Him, it's not going to strain Him or grieve Him much. If I don't do it, He'll get somebody else to. And I don't know why God put me here. Or why I wasn't born somewhere overseas, but I believe I was born for this time, and I believe I was born for this place, and I want to do all I know to do. So it means so much to do the will of the Lord. I hope this has helped you. I hope it's be what you were looking for in some more things about Esther. It's one of my favorite books when she approached God the way that we all have to do. So may God bless you is my prayer.